right, welcome everyone. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Vic has already made fun of me enough backstage. So another week, another natural ones, joined by Victor Gorchev as always.
Hoi iedereen.
And
you're welcome.
Our special guest, Alexander Macris, author, creator of Adventure Conqueror King system, and I'm excited to have him here to talk about the second version coming up here of the game, because I want to get it, and everyone's was telling me like wait till the new version comes out, and I think Alex might have frozen.
Yeah, I'm like, is he frozen or is he just that happy? I'm like looking.
Can you guys hear me? Can you guys?
Yeah, your video's frozen, but it's like just you smiling.
It's fine.
I know it's frozen on my end too. It's like a creepy smile.
Yeah.
Little,
it's not that
Jack,
creepy.
I'm like staring at it.
Jack
like,
Nicholson here.
Yeah, or is he just a Joker?
That's kind of creepy.
Yeah.
It's all good. It's one of those evenings with technology so far.
Yeah, seriously. Well, thanks for having me on again to the show, guys. I'm excited.
We're excited too.
It's been a labor of love to get this finished. I really got driven into overdrive starting in January, and I've been crunching ever since. So the end is finally in sight.
It's amazing. I mean, last time we talked, you had talked about how you'd written between the three books. This was over 1,000 pages or 800 pages or something like that, right?
Yeah. So it's three books, each about 500 pages. So it's 1,500 pages total. There's a revised rule book, which is 500 pages. That's actually slightly bigger than that. That's the biggest one, and that's got all of the character classes. It has 18 character classes. It's got like 110 proficiencies, 378 spells. It's got the equipment lists that take you from adventurer to king. So like weapons and armor, but also naval vessels, strongholds, war machines, rules for constructing your own. Then it does dungeon delving, wilderness expeditions, including weather, sea voyages and naval warfare, with everything from boarding to grappling to Greek fire. Then we've got all the combat mechanics, and then stronghold and domain rules, hijink and hideout rules for thieves to run their own criminal guilds, magic research mechanics, mercantile venture system to do trade routes and build and manage caravans. And then finally, the last three chapters are the mass combat system, with scalable rules for like raising and organizing your army, maneuvering them on strategic theaters, maintaining line of supplies, and then finally doing pitch battles and sieges. So it's a comprehensive book.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
It's like a book that can do anything, because you've essentially, what you've done is you've made like a role-playing, like a traditional role-playing game and a war game, and like I feel like almost at this point it's like one of those resource strategy games, like video games, but played at the table almost, like all kind of mix into one. I got cover up here too, just so people can look at that.
Oh yeah. So that's actually what I love about this, is that it's actually the moment after the ACKS first edition cover. If you look at that on Drive-Thru-RPG, and it shows the fighter and the blade dancer sneaking in behind the throne to attack the wizard. So then for the second edition here, we have the attack actually happening. So that was kind of a fun homage to the first edition.
I think that's cool. I like that. I don't know where to start, because this is such a massive project, I guess.
It's been massive.
It's so I guess we'll start with under the hood. We talked about this last time. You essentially built like BX, and I feel like what it sounds like is kind of like that Rule Cyclopedia vibe, where Rule Cyclopedia was really good at that whole like going from the grimy, dirty adventure to potentially having your domain up until like you could gain godhood if you had the immortal. That wasn't necessarily included in BECME or in the Rule Cyclopedia, but within BECME, you had that progression of going through these tiers, and you're really playing off of that. So it seems like a natural fit. But you mentioned last time too, like this, it's almost like a bit of AD&D isms in here as well. That there we go.
I pulled up my people.
Yes, you can see the
Yeah, that's cool.
I like that. But you've also pulled in some AD&D-isms, it sounds like, as well, as far because AD&D also has a lot of the stuff where it can be played like I won't say war game or mass combat game, because I watched your recent video about mass combat and the problems in it, and how Adventure Conquer King solves a lot of those problems, which I'm excited about, because it got me thinking like, oh yeah, well, chainmail really isn't. Chainmail is like a
skirmish game.
It's not a war. Yeah. So this is definitely something like big, unique, and new that I don't think any other game really kind of covers.
I hope not. I'm if I release it and someone's like, yeah, everything you've done has been done before, I'm gonna be pretty heartbroken.
But oh, go ahead if you're gonna say
no, go ahead. Yeah,
I would say I just think it's cool. This is like the kind of direction I kind of want to see a lot of stuff in old school gaming go, because this is like well beyond just a BX clone, because people are always like, and I'm sure you've heard it before too, why do I need another clone of BX? And it's like, at this point, it's like so much more than that, like beyond that, in my opinion.
Oh yeah. So like, it feels like when the old school Renaissance really got going, it leaned really heavily into BX, which I understand why, because BX is a really great chassis. It's a great game. It's easy to get into. But people never really got past almost like the B part, right? Like the vast majority of old school play you hear about is low level, mud core, people getting killed constantly. And you hear very few actual play of OSR games advancing into high levels. And a lot of the sort of the new SR games that have come out, sort of the semi clones, they're noteworthy because, you have random leveling, or, you have these cool backgrounds in your village or whatever. But again, it's just this focus on this very sort of low level play. And I suspect that was probably a reaction to the superheroism of like 4th edition and 5th edition. But it left neglected like this whole open gameplay space where it's like, Conan's not a superhero, but he's also not like a low-level dude getting grimy, right? Like he becomes a king and he does king things. And so so the goal of ACKS 2 is to give you end game action that's more than just a treadmill of high hit die foes, right? Like so many other games, at 1st level you fight kobolds, at 5th level you fight ogres, at 9th level you fight demons, but it's always the same. Here we want it to be like, no, you're building and running domains, you're conquering your enemies in war, you're breaking the laws of magic with rituals. And I've set the experience point mechanics all integrate the campaign activities into the gameplay loops. You can actually level up by doing the campaign activities rather than by adventuring. So
I think that's cool, because like in the rule cyclopedia, it's pretty much at higher levels. If you have a domain, it's like, well, I'm just leveling up gold for XP from taxes, pretty much. And while it works and it's great, and I love the rule cyclopedia, this just feels like it's like the rule cyclopedia, but like dialed up to 11, maybe dialed up to like 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's dialed up pretty high for sure.
It's dialed up to 37, because what isn't the max level 36 in Rule Cyclopedia?
There you go. I like that.
Yeah. Well, we keep max level at 14 because beyond that, I think you start to get into the super heroics again. And BECMI struggled with that a little bit. Like you have 36 level people with the power of gods, but they're supposed to care about their barony. It's like, not really.
Yeah.
No.
Well, and it definitely like messed up like thief skills too. How do you progress those percentile skills over 36 levels?
Right. Right.
It ends up making the thief suck at level 1, or he's just useless.
Yep. Yeah, I spent a ton of time working to make the thief good in ACKS. I'm just tired of. I like thieves. My first character I ever made in BX was a thief. I'm just tired of like these low level thieves that suck and can't even do their job. And you're like, sorry, you failed to pick this lock, so you can never try again unless you come back at a higher level. You know, I mean, it's just not, it's not realistic. It's not plausible. It's not fun. Like, why is this still our mechanic all these years later? So
Yeah.
Well, and like the if you go back to like, well, thieves weren't in 0E per se. They were added on in
Right.
Greyhawk, but you know, every level has a title, and Vic and I have talked about it. You know, like a level 1 fighter is a veteran. He knows some things. Like he's better. He's better than the average, you know, guy that's out there in the world. He's above. He's already has military training. He's above and beyond. But then the thief comes along, and it's like he supposedly has this. I don't remember what his title is, but he has a title as well, which implies that he's not this know nothing loser. But then you use him, and you're like, he's kind of this know nothing loser. But let's start there then, because I think people maybe aren't familiar with your game. Let's start with like classes like that too, and I'll be starting comments from chat as well.
Oh, sure. Okay.
To do that, but let's maybe, because I'm assuming based on what I've seen is that and the things that you sent me, because you sent me the Word docs of where it's kind of at.
Mm-hmm.
And there's more like on the cover you have the Blade Dancer, so you have classes that are these are like your own classes that you've made. These aren't like cleric, fighter,
right,
with magic user, thief. You know, you have more options than that. So why don't we start there?
Yeah, sure. So the classes are divided into 3 groups. There's the core classes, the campaign classes, and the racial classes. The core classes, there's 1 for each ability score. So for strength, it's fighter. For intellect, it's mage. For will, it's crusader. For dexterity, it's thief. Constitution, explorer, and then charisma is the venturer. The fighter, the mage, the crusader will be relatively familiar to most people. The thief has some changes, one of which is that he has a power called shadowy senses, which enables him to effectively see in the dark. And we've meanwhile removed infravision from the player character races.
Oh, okay.
So one of the things that's always really frustrating when you're a thief player is that you're supposed to be like the master of the shadows, but all of the elves and dwarves just have thermal imaging and you can't see in the dark at all. So you're like, well, I'm kind of gimped from the get-go here. So we got rid of that. And so now the thieves can actually stealth around. Some of the monsters still have infravision, but they have, for the most part, relatively short range infravision. So the thief can still have a good chance to stealth. Another major change for the thieves is that they can tackle problems in 2 ways, hastily or methodically. And if you do it hastily, then you have like the old, really tough percentages at low level, so it's hard to succeed, but it only takes 1 combat round instead of taking a turn. And then if you try methodically, it takes a full turn, but you have a lot higher chance to succeed. And you can also continue to keep trying methodically every turn until you roll a 1, at which point you break the lock or something like that.
So is it traditional percentile for doing it quickly, and then is it a D20 roll for doing it methodically?
It's all converted to D20 rolls. So, yeah. So like, for instance, doing it quickly might be, you need a 18 or higher, and then doing methodically, you need a 14 or higher. It's a 20% difference, +4 difference. Plus you can try again if you fail. And so that makes it a really big difference, because now the thief can be hastily searching for traps as the party walks around the dungeon. It isn't like, hey, everybody, we need to stop for 10 minutes. He can be hastily checking as he goes, looking around. And then if they get to an area that looks suspicious, he can stop, do a methodical search, come to a door. He can try to hastily get through. If that doesn't work, methodically get through. And it transforms the thief powers from these, you failed and now you're stuck things, to how much time do we want to invest in this? The other thing we did is we removed a lot of the spells that really damage exploration. So for instance, there's no spell to just immediately detect traps. There's no spell to, sort of replace picking a lock, right? There's no knock spell. There's a battering ram spell. You can blow a door down as a mage, but you can't do what a thief does. Because that was a big problem in BECMI, AD&D, even 3.5. Like, people are like, oh, what does the thief do at 20th level? Nothing. They don't even take him on the adventure. Yeah.
I wonder if that's Well, I wonder if that's a holdover because, like in Zero E, you don't have a thief class at all, and the cleric has like the detect traps thing, and so it's sort of just this holdover from.
Yep.
There was this it was sort of the cleric's job, and then it got shifted over to the thief, but then it never got changed in the rules to take it away from the cleric, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
So the way the new divination spells work is that magic, it can't necessarily distinguish man-made items by function, right? So you can't detect a trap because how does it know if it's a trap, right? But you can detect metal, right? Or things like that. You can detect magic. You could detect gold or gems because those are like elemental things. But you can't use detection spells like, well, find me all the secret doors. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate spells like that just completely bypass, like, I don't know, the adventure part, like,
Yep.
the mystery.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So likewise, we changed. In BX, there's the spell comprehend languages or read languages, depending on the edition. We changed that to discern gist, so that the spell tells you the gist of what the text says, but not the exact text or specifics. So, let's you find this scroll written in a dead language, you cast the spell, and you're like, oh, this is a treasure map to a tomb, but you're not necessarily able to personally now be like, and I know how to get there. What you know is that this is worth taking to a sage who speaks this dead language to have it translated, right?
Yeah, that's really cool.
So that was, and again, thieves, one of their powers is read languages. So it totally sucks that that's just like a second level spell. So I essentially went through, because I was moving off the open game license, I had to get rid of all the legacy D&D-isms anyway. And so I used as an opportunity to go through the entire spell list and think of it like, no sacred cows, what could I actually get rid of or change that would make the game better? And it's made a really big difference in gameplay. Like commune, for instance, right? You can ask 3 yes or no questions to the GM because you're talking to your god. Well, now commune has been clarified that you're not directly communing with God. You're communing to the equivalent of a saint or a hero or a demigod. And he might be wrong, and his power might be blocked by opposing gods, right? And so, as an example, in one of my campaigns, the players were like, is the Dark Lord still alive? Yes. Okay, well, is this the One Ring of Power? Yes. Do we have to take it to more? Yes. Right. Like that's not very fun. So
No.
So now we have the ability to add uncertainty into that, right? So anyway, very fine tooth comb on all the spells, and I think it's really benefited. So that's I guess that's that side of it. The fighters are still really awesome. They have the ability to do cleaves and sweep attacks, and so at high levels, you can be like that scene in book 30 of the Iliad where you're just on your chariot and you're just hewing down people nonstop, or you're Huron, and every blow of your axe, you take out a troll and you take down 70 trolls. Like, that becomes possible at high levels for the fighters. So they, and that was really important to let fighters scale because you want to scale up to mass combat. And so you don't want them to be inconsequential, right? Like Huron was not inconsequential in mass combat. Same kind of thing.
Let me get this super chat from Black Lodge Games. Thank you guys. Sacred cows taste the best. So thank you for the $5.
It's true. They taste good. Nom nom nom.
Yeah, a lot of those changes sound really awesome. I especially like the methodical one because I agree with you. Like thief skills kind of suck. I'm currently writing for Old School Essentials, and I'm trying to stick to the conventions, so I'm kind of stuck with them. But like, I wish I had thought of that and just put it in as an optional. But but even just that like really makes me want to check out the game.
Okay,
awesome. Yeah. So let's see. Then there's 2 new core classes, which they've been in previous ACKS books, but they're not in BX, which is the Explorer and the Venturer. And the idea was that each of the core classes was going to cover one aspect of gameplay, right? So arcane casting, divine casting, melee combat, dungeon exploration is the thief. The Explorer is wilderness exploration. So he has bonuses to navigate. He can help you evade in the wilderness more effectively. You know, he has skill at hiding in the wilderness, things like that. You know, he's naturally stealthy, harder to surprise. And one of the interesting mechanics about him is that as his abilities only work within a limited radius of civilization. And as he levels up, he's able to venture further and further and further out of civilization, representing him becoming a more experienced explorer who's traversed more territory. Yeah. And that turned out to be a really important rule, because some people cheesily were like, well, what we're going to do is when we're ready to go in the wilderness, we'll just hire a first level explorer and get all the benefits of having an explorer. And you're like, well, you know, we don't want it to work that way. So by making the powers scaling, you keep people effective all the time. And then the last one is the venturer. So a lot of people think that Bard is kind of a default charisma class, but in ACKS, the Venturer is the default charisma class. And that is he's basically like a merchant adventurer. So he gets the ability to set up steady trade routes where he can trade any two goods between cities at a deep discount and find more buyers and sellers. He can increase the amount of equipment he can buy and sell in towns. He can find more mercenaries than other players. He can do rumor mongering, pick up rumors when he visits business establishments.
I like that.
So it's a really fun class. The current party leader in my actual play, Castinus, is a venturer. And so you get to see like him in action. And one of the venturer powers is called treachery, which is if you parlay with someone and you get friendly relations, and then you then attack them, they're basically automatically surprised.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. But it doesn't work against other people that also have the treachery power, because, you know, it takes
they're on to you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We got thank you, sir. I think I pronounced that right. Hopefully I did. Everyone says Ogma, but I don't think that's correct. $9.99, and he just said, I didn't have a question. I just want y'all to know I support this. So thank you, sir, for the $9.99.
Thank you. Yeah. So those are our core classes. The campaign classes, it's Blade Dancer, Barbarian, Bard, Shaman, Priestess, and I'm forgetting one, because that was 5, right? Which one am I forgetting? I am forgetting Assassin. Yeah, so Assassin, Barbarian, Bard, Blade Dancer, Priestess, Shaman. So these are what the campaign classes are. This is to show off the custom class design rules and to give you some more options. So the Assassin is obviously like a fighter thief type. The Barbarian is kind of a explorer fighter hybrid. The Blade Dancer is a cleric of the goddess of war, who wears light armor but has more combat oriented magic. The Priestess is kind of like a non-violent healer, diviner type. The Shaman is our equivalent of the Druids, but I actually went back and sort of like researched original shamanism to find out the sort of powers that were attributed to them. So they can talk to the ancestral spirits, and they can take spirit form, and they can have a totem animal and transform into their animal and things like that. So that's a really nice. I actually think the Shaman is one of the best design classes in the game.
That sounds cool.
And then the Bard, the way we did the Bard is that, the Bard gets arcane dabbling, so he can use items that other people haven't figured out how to use yet, but at risk. He can inspire courage in other party members, which is a really valuable thing. Give them +1 to hit and damage. And then he also has Jack of all trades, which is the ability to learn class proficiencies from any other class as he levels up. And so, if the Bard wanted to be like, oh, hey, I want to learn how to sneak like a thief, he can do that. Hey, I want to learn how to set up a trade route like a venturer, I can do that. And so each Bard gets to be kind of unique, which is good fun.
Like, I could see that being useful, like because one thing I hate is people that build the whole build a character thing. Like I'm level 1 or level 2, and now I'm trying to take things and make choices for like 20 levels down the line.
Right. Right.
Whereas a character like that with that ability, that sort of becomes like, our party needs this right now, and like I could do that. Like I could learn to do that. So and fill that gap. So that's pretty neat. I think that's cool.
Right. Yeah, and for people that are into character building and they want to sit there and think about like, oh, I can't wait till my Bard gets to 7th level, I'm going to get this or whatever. Like, it's there for them. But then, if you want a more traditional character like a fighter or explorer, they're there for you as well. So then the last set of classes is the demi-human classes. We got the Dwarven Craft Priest, which is the cleric for the dwarves. Dwarven Vault Guard. The Elven Nightblade, who's a magic-using assassin. So you can think of him as like a mage thief.
Nice.
The
I like
Elven
that.
Spell Sword, who's of course the classic fighter mage. And then we have the Nobiran Wonder Worker. So Nubirans are basically like Greek demigods, like descendants, or Numenorians, or whatever you want to think of them as. And so the Wonder Worker has both clerical and divine magic, arcane and divine magic. And then finally we have the Zaharn Ruin Guard, who's very much inspired by like your Elric of Melnibone template. So they've got like dark bloodline and pacts with chaotic gods, and they have arcane magic, and they have the ability to channel their magic through their sword. So that's another one of my favorite classes. It's really good fun. So
are there dwarven wizards? this is kind of an inside joke, but yes, no, I need to know. I need to know from my friend Max from Legion of Myth. He loves dwarven wizards. Can you make a dwarven wizard?
Okay, that's such a good question. So not in the core rules, but if you go to buy this ACKS, there are a number of different dwarven caster classes. There's the
Nice.
there's the dwarven earth forgers, there's the dwarven furnace wives, there's the dwarven spore casters. So we have some amazing and of course the buy this ACKS is designed to be compatible with ACKS 2. So really fun stuff there.
Nice. I'll let my friend Max know that you can be a dwarven wizard.
So I'm going to bring up some people's questions out of order as they like kind of come up with the what we're talking about. And Ryan Heffelfinger asks, how do proficiencies work in ACKS 2? I'm kind of curious about that as well.
Yeah. Okay. So there's two types of proficiencies, class proficiencies and general proficiencies. They are something like a hybrid of feats and skills. And I guess they would be similar to, I think, what were called talents in first edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. So some of the proficiencies, particularly the class proficiencies, will modify some game mechanic in an exceptional way. So for instance, I have weapon and shield fighting style specialization, so I get +1 armor class when I'm wielding a shield. I have contemplation proficiency, so I can spend an hour once a day meditating to get a spell back rather than have to do 8 hours. I have black lore of Zahar proficiency, so I can control undead as a cleric of half my level, and there's a -2 penalty to save against my necromancy spells, right? So you've got, so those are feat like, but there's no chains, there's no feat chains, so there's no prime requisites, you never break your build, and there's rules for retraining. So if you're like, I didn't like this proficiency, you can just retrain it out in 30 days of downtime and you move on with your character's life. Because I'm like you, I hate that thing that like at level 1, I'm supposed to figure out level 14. Like, no, that's just, no.
Yeah. Because sometimes the party needs something and it's like, this was a good thing for now. And now our needs have changed as the campaigns progress.
Exactly. So, exactly. Particularly in a game like ACKS where you go from adventurer to king. So like maybe at first level, dungeon bashing was a really good choice, but at 14th level, you want command and not dungeon bashing, you know? So then there's the general proficiencies, and the general proficiencies were basically designed to explain how specialists do their jobs. So there's an engineering specialist. Well, how does he do his things? Well, he has the engineering proficiency. And if you take the engineering proficiency, you can work like an engineer. The alchemy proficiency lets you be an alchemist. The knowledge proficiency lets you be a sage, etc. You know, craft proficiency lets you be an armorer or a blacksmith or whatever. So the general proficiencies are the ones that the 0th level characters of the world have. And there's a few general proficiencies that have more applicability to adventuring. So like hard labor will make you more capable of adventuring if you're like a laborer, or the endurance proficiency. Military strategy is a general proficiency that's valuable to an adventurer as he levels up, etc. So you get one general and one class at first level. You get bonus general proficiencies based on your intelligence. So if you have intelligence 18, you get 3 bonus general proficiencies, which actually lets highly intelligent characters be really learned, which is cool. And it makes int not a dump stat, right? Like if you wanting to be a fighter who's going to be a great captain and has 3 ranks of military strategy, it really helps to have high intelligence, right? Like Alexander the Great obviously had int 18. He was chilling with Aristotle. And then as you level up, you get new general proficiencies based on your class, and you get new class proficiencies based on your class. So, yeah.
So with stats like that, then are you doing like 3d6 down the line, or do you offer kind of like AD&D different methods of generating attribute scores or ability scores, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So we offer a bunch of methods. The default method works like this. So you pick one stat and you roll 5 6-sided dice, keep the best 3. If it's less than 13, you raise it to 13. Then you pick 2 stats. You roll 4d6 for each of those, keep the best 3. If they're less than 9, you raise them to 9. And then you roll straight 3d6 for the other 3. And that system was really carefully tested because it guarantees that you will always be able to have a playable character of approximately the sort that you want. Like if you want to be a fighter, you can put the strength, the 5d6, dex and con, the 4d6, and you know that at the absolute worst, you're going to have strength 13, strength 13, constitution 9, dexterity 9, and have a totally playable fighter. You might end up stupid. You might end up with a weak will. You might end up uncharismatic, but you might end up with good stats in those things. But at a minimum, you know you're going to be okay.
Just like real life stuff.
Yeah. And the reason for that is that one of the things we noticed is a lot of people come in and they look at the classes and they fall in love with a particular class. And they're like, I really want to play that in this campaign. And then it's really frustrating if you just do straight 3d6 and you can't play that class. So this way, this is a compromise where we kept random stats, but we give you a little ability to tweak around the edges. Keeping random stats was really important to me because I think games like 5th edition get really stereotyped in terms of the builds, right? Like, oh, you took strength on your mage. Well, you're an idiot. Why would you do that? That's it's a dump stat for you, right? But since it's random, you could make strength your dump stat, but still end up with a 16 strength, and now you're a muscle wizard, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think that's cool too. It adds like a different element to your character, like role playability. Like you're like, I was playing because OD&D 0E, like your stats don't really matter all that much. The best the best you're gonna get is a +1 in strength. It's not. So we were playing, and we're doing Tonnisborg, and one of the characters who's a wizard, and he had the strongest strength out of everyone. And so he was the guy, he was the one that was like kicking indoors and stuff like that, despite having like lower hit points.
That's hilarious.
He was just the strongest out of all of them. It was fun. So I like that.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we ended up with the Crusader, which is the cleric equivalent. The Crusader has the highest charisma in my current party, and so he's like this fiery preacher who's constantly, like, yeah. So it's good. It's good fun.
I think that's cool. Let me look at chat here. This is a good one here from Ohm. He says, except he needs to clarify if there's a harlot table. It's super important.
There are tables that generate harlots, but it is not a harlot table.
There you go.
So,
hope that
in other words,
your...
if you are using the settlement adventure rules and your players are moving around the city, you can dynamically generate the city as they go. And some of the places in the city that you can generate will be body houses that have harlots. So, yes, and they are statted out. We actually tell you what proficiencies they have. It's seduction, performance, dance. It's revelry, a couple others.
Super important. He needed to know. So,
well, listen, Gary Gygax had it in AD&D, so I had to have something. Yeah,
it's a nice homage. That's cool. Ryan had another question about AC, and he said, we're talking about how you changed AC on Twitter DMs. Could you elaborate on that? Additionally, how powerful are ACKS PCs compared to just regular BX ones? Oh, so I know your AC system is a little different. So I'm curious what it is.
Well, at the time that I first designed ACKS, there was like this huge uproar in the community, right? Because you had your oldest school players were saying armor class should start at 10 and go down from there, so that plate mail is AC 3, and if you're AC 0, you've got magic, and you could go down to -10, right? So that was like the old school AD&D perspective. Start at 10 and go down. And then you had the 3.5 players, And they were like, no, AC starts at 10 and goes up, AC 11, AC 12, AC, plate mail is AC 16. And I thought about it and I said, this is kind of a stupid debate. Like, I'm just going to set it up so that 0 armor is 0 AC. So your AC is 0 if you have 0 armor. And then if you have armor, it goes up from 0 rather than going up from 10. So that's the AC system in X. So if you wanted to convert it to BX or AD&D, it would be 10 minus your AC. If you wanted to convert it to 3.5, you would add 10 to it. In terms of our characters tougher than BX characters, yes, they are, for a couple reasons. So one, I mean, as we mentioned, the thieves can see in the dark. They can methodically and hastily search. So they're more powerful. Mages don't have to memorize their spells. Instead, they can cast any spell from their repertoire. So if you happen to have in your repertoire, Wall of Smoke, Mage Missile, and Discern Magic, you don't have to pick at the start of the session. Because when you have to pick at the start of the session, you're always going to take Mage Missile because you know that you'll be able to use that. You're never going to do. Whereas we let you spontaneously decide how you want to use the spell. So they're kind of a hybrid of sorcerers and wizards. And then the fighters are much more powerful because they get cleaves and sweep attacks and a fighter damage bonus as they level up. And the Crusaders benefit both from some of the fighter buffs as well as some of the buffs to casters. And then finally, there's also our death system, which is punitive, but not as punitive as you just die at 0 hit points. So in fact, you'll probably survive if reduced to 0 hit points. You just get kind of like progressively more serious wounds so that, you've got a pierced lung or you lost your hand or, whatever the case may be. Like, for instance, in the second session of my current campaign, the barbarian lost his hand. And it's like, that sucked, like nobody wants to lose a hand, but he was still totally playable. And he just renamed the character, Higlak Half Hand, and switched over to a one-handed axe with a shield strapped on. It was like good to go.
Farth and the Great Mouser lost his hand, so hey, there we go.
He did, yeah.
But do you have like an injury table then? So you hit like 0 and then you roll on the injury table. It's like, oh, you lose your hand, you lost an eye, you have this. Yep. Okay, that's cool.
Yep. Yeah, there's an injury table for each type of damage, basically. So, if it's slashing damage, piercing damage, fire damage. And then what happens is you roll on the die, and the die roll is modified by how quickly your friends got to you to give you first aid, whether they had any healing magic to use when they got to you, did they have healing proficiency when they got to you, and what's your constitution and how far below 0 were you. So like, for instance, let's imagine I'm reduced to -10 hit points. They don't get to me for an hour, and the guy who finds me has no skill at healing whatsoever. I'm going to be in really bad shape on that die roll. On the other hand, if I go down and I'm at let's say I'm at -3, and the priestess, who has a bunch of healing proficiency and some spells, and she actually bravely runs forward through the battle lines to provide emergency first aid, then I have a lot better chance of recovering with a lesser wound. And that's been really fun because it actually creates like this almost Vietnam War style, like medic. And then they actually are kind of like trying to make their way through the battle lines. And we've seen, really spectacular gameplay come from that, as like the priestess saves the paladin, but then the priestess gets cut down, and then they're dragging both bodies out, and it's good times.
Yeah, that sounds really fun.
Oh, okay, hold on. I wanted to start that one. We'll get to that one in a second here. I like that. I've ran games at 0, death at 0. I ran an AD&D game at death at 0, and it was pretty brutal. I think I killed. Yeah. I had a near TPK every session for like 5 sessions before they started making better life choices. It was kind of their own fault, but losing a hand, as long as there's like some sort of punishment there for it, I think that's cool. So
yeah, well, what's I should add is that you can then use magic to heal your injuries, right? So you can go and get a repair disability spell or restore life. But every time you do that, you have to roll on a separate table called Tampering with Mortality. And then that can give you side effects. And sometimes the side effects are worse than the thing. So like, oh yeah, you got your hand back, but now you're being hunted by an invisible stalker everywhere you go. And you're like, I think I'd rather have not had my hand. This is terrible. Like, what have I done? And that's also the in-world explanation for why a lot of people don't get restore life and limb or raise dead or resurrection, because the consequences are horrible, and only crazy, psychopathic, over ambitious megalomaniacs like adventurers are willing to risk that kind of thing.
Yeah, so basically the gods or whatever, or the spirits are like, hey, you're meddling with our forces. Gonna like go after you. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
cool.
Yeah, and they're set up by alignment, right? So, for instance, if you're lawful alignment, one of the side effects is that you glow like a candle to undead with this brilliant golden aura, and so they all hate you, are instantly hostile, and always attack you first. Which, you're like, the gods are like, we've singled you out as a champion and restored you to life. You will glow with our radiant power, and you're like, I didn't want to glow like a torch to undead. But then if you're chaotic and you get the same result, then you come back and you actually you come back with the pallor of death, and undead actually think you're one of them, and you kind of smell like a corpse, but they're friendly to you, right? So it's like depending which gods you're messing with.
Yeah.
I like rules like that are tied to a setting,
for sure.
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of rules imply settings, so
that's
same. For sure. Yeah, and that's been a real challenge for ACKS, because I actually agree with you. And so there is a default campaign setting for ACKS. But so what I basically do is I lay it out like, this is the rules that define the setting. And then about a third of the judge's journal is devoted to customizing the game for other settings. So if you're like, hey, well, how do I want to adapt ACKS to use it with this other stuff? And this is how you do it.
But I think that's cool. Having a vision and building rules around that, I think is important. And again, it makes it so it becomes, I think, something more. It's not just another BX or a Beckme clone. It's
exactly
it becomes something wholly unique and different and new at that point, which I think is cool.
Totally.
Let's see.
Sorry, I have allergies right now, so if I mute myself, I'm pretty much sneezing and stuff. So yeah.
Sorry, man.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
I've been watching your mass combat videos lately. Like I said, like the mass combat ones, and so we got some questions here on this. Gone Barleycorn says, wanted to say how much I've been enjoying the Arbiter of Worlds channel and the high quality content. Thanks for helping me make Mondays more bearable. Very excited about the new edition. And he also said, I'm mostly through with my second go around with Prince of Nothing, God Aspect Emperor, thinking about magic and mass combat and how much can different classes of magic affect battles, and have there been usual or unexpected consequences from magic in mass combat?
Wow, those are great questions. So first off, Prince of Nothing and Aspect Emperor particularly Prince of Nothing was really influential on me when I was originally designing ACKS, because it had very powerful casters, but it also had actual mass battles of the scale similar to the First Crusade, which was rarely seen, and I thought a really remarkable job of world building he did. So So I think you could actually use ACKS to run Prince of Nothing probably, and it would be epic. To answer your question, so Magic has more or less been tuned to be at about the level of importance of artillery in Napoleonic warfare. So if you think about Napoleonic warfare, that was really the last time that you had cavalry with a functional role on the battlefield, infantry with a functional role on the battlefield, but then you also had these long-range killing devices on the battlefield, and everything mattered, and you still had mass formations of troops where 100,000 dudes gathered on one battlefield and fought it all out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought to myself, if I can tune Magic to the extent that that it's similar to the power of Napoleonic cannon, then this will work, and I can still have the awesome pitch battles that I want, and it won't degenerate into Gulf War 20 BC, which you call. Because like what you don't want is, why did I bother to raise an army of 10,000 troops when they all just got killed by the genie in the first round? Like that's not, why?
No,
why
the X Gulf War, that will be my supplement that I'm gonna write next year.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, I mean, there's good fun to be had there with that kind of Magic as modern tech type vibe.
Yeah.
It's just that if you go that route, you can't have ancient battles like the Hydaspes or Gaugamela, because we don't have those anymore for that very reason, because they would get destroyed by airstrikes or whatever. So unusual, or how much can different classes of magic affect battles? Okay, so Arcane starts to get very powerful on the battlefield at 3rd level, because at that point you can do a fireball, and a fireball can take out about 1/8 of a company. And so at a company scale, a wizard who can fling a few fireballs can definitely personally make a difference. As you advance higher in level, then you become able to affect larger units. And so there's high-level spells, for instance, like Conflagration, which can just incinerate an entire company instantly. But you've only got like one mage capable of casting an 11th level spell in an army of 30, 40, 50,000 guys. So it's, it's not exactly going to change everything. And then the divine casters are similar, but their magic tends to be a little bit more subtle. There's more buffs, protection, things like that. Unusual and unexpected consequences. So we had all sorts of really things have come up. And what's happened is, as they've come up over these last 12 years of playtesting, I formalized them. So, for instance, one very clever fellow figured out that Wall of Stone was a bad idea to use to build fortifications because it could be dispelled. So what he did instead is he used Wall of Stone to create molds, and then poured Roman concrete inside the molds that he had created with the Wall of Stone. And then after the concrete dried, he dispelled his walls of stone. And so then he had instant concrete fortifications. And I was like, oh, that's really clever, So now that's actually like a technique that's in the rules. Other stuff we've seen, a lot of use of like control of the weather. If you've got an archery heavy opponent, you summon up a thick rainstorm, their arrows are less useful. Move Earth has been very, very powerful. Particularly when you get into siege warfare, the Romans at the siege of Masada had to build a mountain next to the fortress of Masada in order to be able to besiege it. With Move Earth, you're like, I'm just going to move the mountain over here. So that can be really effective. I've seen people actually, like, we had one battle where someone diverted the flow of a river using magic, and changed the course of the battle. So yeah, there's been some really unusual fun stuff. But the nice thing about it is that it kind of scales with the size of the army because of the way the demographics work, so that by the time you have a mage who's capable of changing the course of a river, changing the course of a river is no longer enough to win the battle by itself. It's a force multiplier. And of course, your army is being opposed by other guys who have similar levels of power. And so there's just spells swinging back and forth and stuff. So
I would just have like whole units whose whole job is to go after magic users. Like,
absolutely,
like a special forces team of like some assassins that just like look for that dude with the pointy hat, and
and that's actually, it's great you raised that, because so the rules provide for what are called heroic forays when you're using the mass combat, which is basically personal intervention by the player characters into the battle. And so they stake how much risk they're willing to let their characters take, and then they can go out and sort of you resolve that element of it as a one-to-one combat using the tactical rules, and then you apply that up the stream to the effects of the battle. And so you can do that. You can actually say, hey, we're going to go do a heroic foray. The thieves are going to go out. We're going to have invisibility on, etc. It's cool stuff.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like in a shot and pike sort of thing. Like they might want to try and take out those cannons.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. That's gonna jack up our cavalry or our pikemen or whatever. So we need to take that out. So
exactly.
I could see that. Like you're very powerful, but you're also painting a big target on your back on that battlefield.
Yes.
So it balances out.
Yes. Yeah, particularly in ACKS, wizards have to pre-declare their spells, and if they get interrupted, they lose the spell. And so, you have to take steps to avoid being skewered by 120 archers just dropping arrows on you. You're like, oh, well, guess I'm not getting my spell off. So
that's cool. Mass combat is something I want to kind of get in. Part of the reason why I'm excited for your Kickstarter is because, like, in my current campaign, the players are there was the Sultanate to the south, and there's been this invasion of them to the northern kingdoms, and like the city that was their home base has been besieged or is about to be besieged. They haven't been back to the town yet in like weeks, so we're not sure what's going to happen yet. We'll see what happens when they come back down from the mountain. from their adventuring. But you know, I'm going to get to a point where it's like they're going to want to start taking part in that stuff, and like I could use like chainmail and stuff like that, but it would just be a skirmish. You know, it wouldn't be like It wouldn't be like Helm's Deep. It wouldn't be like the like Minas Tirith or something like that. It would be like it'd just be a skirmish, like a skirmish.
Yeah, you can do a few hundred guys with chainmail with battle system, 1 to 10 scale, but you can't really do, 50,000 on a side or something like that. Whereas we do scale up that big with ACKS. So basically, the mass combat rules have 4 scales: platoon scale, company scale, battalion scale, and brigade scale. And so at platoon scale, the Army General will typically have somewhere between 12 to 24 units in his army. He could have more, but that's like a typical range. So platoon scale, those units are the size of 30 men or 15 horse. At company scale, it's 120 men or 60 horse. At battalion scale, it's 480 men or 240 horse. And then brigade scale, it's 1,920 men or 900, whatever it is, horse. And so, if you've got 24 units of 2,000 men, that's a 50,000 person army. That's pretty big.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff, like, again, you read about in your Tolkien novels, or
exactly,
when Conan is king, and he's leading his armies, it's not just a skirmish. So that I'm excited for that. I had another question and it just escaped me. I'm getting dementia already or something. I don't know.
I feel you, man. I'm getting to the point, like I'm rereading rules and I'm like, I don't even remember writing this rule.
I have that too, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'll be running my own game and somebody will ask me something and I'm like, I don't know. I wrote that. Like, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's like Stephen King says he doesn't remember writing Cujo. Like, he just doesn't remember writing it. Like, I don't remember chapter 11. I'm not sure where it came from.
Well, he was doing the nose candy though, so I think it was less.
He was. That's true. I've only been abusing caffeine and Adderall. No nose candy for me.
Let me look at my starred comments here. Let's see if we can answer some of these questions here. Let's see if you have a party. So let's get Crafty Matt's questions. He's a supporter of the channel and values questions. Says, when you have a party 5, how do you choose who gets to be king?
That's a great question. And there's a couple different answers to that. So first, the different classes tend to have different end game priorities. So fighters tend to be very straightforward: build a stronghold, get land, raise army. Mages can do that if they want, but mages can also set up sanctums, build dungeons to attract monsters into them, and then tap the monster's life force to fuel their magic research. And so often the mage is going to want to do that rather than build a stronghold and rule peasants, because he can level up faster from doing magic research. The Crusaders can, set up a fortified church and act like a lord if they want to, or what they can do is act as the chaplain or spiritual advisor for the king. And then what they get to do by doing that, they get to tap into all of his population's divine power and absorb that and use that for their own magical research and miracles and things like that. So there's a way. Thieves can set up criminal syndicates, and then they can manage those thieves guilds to make money or find treasure maps, do spying, assassination. And often what we've seen is that the high-level thief ends up becoming the spy master for the king.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then the venturers set up emporiums or trade houses where they get monopolies and they set up steady trade routes and they make money. And they often end up funding the efforts of some of their allies, like, oh, this magic research is really expensive. Where's the money coming from? Well, our friend the venturer is controlling the supply. And so there's different paths for the different characters that let them work together. There's also rules for having magistrates within your realm. So that, for instance, let's say that my character ended up with really high charisma, so I'm going to be the ruler. But your guy is really great at military strategy and training troops. I can appoint you as the captain of the guard, and then you get some of the money from my realm, and you get some of the experience points for being a captain of the guard. You know, I can appoint you the chaplain or the munerator or whatever. And then the last thing we do is you can set up senates. And so you can have a senatorial republic rather than a feudal domain. And with the senatorial republic, you can set up how you want the senators to be. They can be player characters or NPCs. And then the ruler has to obey, you know, what the Senate says, or there's big morale problems. And so you can set up a realm. You can, in theory, set up a realm with a rotating ruler who changes every month and, you know, or every year based on the consulship or whatever you'd like. So I guess the way you choose who gets to be king is it's left up to the players and the setting and the specifics of the character classes. But there's tons of ways you can make it work.
Yeah, that's cool. So like a wizard could literally just become like a Dark Lord or something instead of.
Oh
like, a
yeah,
king.
absolutely.
Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool.
That leads into his next question a little bit. If Ace is asking again, as ACKS claims it is different than BX clones. At the king level, does the game become a PvP war game? And I would assume the answer is it could, if you wanted it to.
Yeah, it doesn't have to, but it could. In most of the campaigns that I've run, my groups tend to be really cooperative. And so at king level, it has been them versus very powerful NPC antagonists. Like in the original Iron Empire campaign, they fought, you know, the tyrant Dracomir, who was trying to take over the empire. They fought the Dark Lord, the Sorcerer King from the Waste. And then having conquered the Iron Empire, conquered the Waste, they then flew to the moon and conquered the moon.
Cool.
You know, that was like Alexander, there's no more worlds to conquer. And they're like, wait a minute. Yes, there are. So they just got on their ship and flew to the moon. So that said, when I ran Oplenian Knights, I had multiple different factions. And in Oplenian Knights, I had people who weren't playing in the campaign playing the two evil Dark Lords that were influencing the campaign setting, controlling their troop movements and things, which is not quite say what like the Bro SR guys are doing at full scale 1-to-1 time, patron play, but easily done if that's your jam. And and there's rules provided for it, like, you know, this is the monthly turn. This is all the things that can happen. This is when you get your money. This is when you spend your money. This is when random events occur. Boom, 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 boom. So it's structured for that.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I want to play X2 now.
Woo!
So.
That's what we want. We want everybody to play it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the truth of the matter is, because it's 3 big books and because it's taken me so long to write, it needs to be my most successful Kickstarter by like a factor of 2, or it's a failure for me, which is really stressful, right? Like,
oh yeah.
Every prior occasion I've been like, oh, I'm just going to do this one book and just have a modest goal, and I'll just do that every year. And this one I was like, you know, crossing the Rubicon, 3 books, blah, blah. And I really hope people like it.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Like everything you're telling me is stuff that like that I want. And again, I wanted Adventure Conqueror King, and I was going to pull the trigger on it, but everyone's like, no, he's going to do a Kickstarter. Wait for his Kickstarter. We have some questions about it. So Crafty's asking again, will the Kickstarter be just for a print run and the game is basically done? So it's obviously you have it written. I'm assuming you probably need some money for art and things like that. That's what this is for.
Yeah. The game is designed, but it's not laid out, doesn't have illustrations, and hasn't been printed. So that's what the Kickstarter is for. You know, and the cost of layout alone, you know, $6 to $8 a page is what I've been quoted. You know, 1,500 pages, that adds up real fast, and that's not even including the art budget, or the printing costs or things like that. So, but yeah, and what's going to happen is as soon as it funds, so like, you know, it's going to end November 24th. A week later, Kickstarter sends me the money. As soon as I get the money, everyone who backs it gets the complete playable drafts in art-free format. And so, boom, like you can start playing ACKS 2 that week if you want. And I'm doing so now with those drafts. So, and have been doing so for a couple of years.
Do you have a pre-sign-up page for it yet, or not yet?
Not yet. I'm waiting on the approval from Kickstarter, but
okay,
they're in turn waiting on me to provide them some art, and so it's, you know.
I see.
Yeah.
And Black Lodge Games is asking, is it going to be an offset print?
Yes, it is. In fact, it's going to be, it's going to have a PU leather cover with kind of like a gold embossing, full color interior, really heavy art paper like we used in the Ascendant rulebook, with, you know, sewn lay flat binding. Like it's going to be a really nice book.
Nice.
Cool. Well,
Yeah.
that gets me excited. Here's a good question, because Rob here at he just finished doing his Gods of the Forbidden North, fulfilling it from his last one. He's funding the sequel book to it because he made so much content it couldn't fit in one book.
Oh, that's awesome.
But
he's also doing a 1,500-page thing. So yeah.
yeah, he's in a similar boat. But he's saying, did someone already ask if there will be a license for ACKS 2 for third-party content?
There absolutely will be. So I'm probably going to use the Orc license. I haven't fully settled on it yet, but I'm probably going to use the Orc license, release the game mechanics, open game, for open gaming, so other people can support it. And then there'll be an ACKS compatibility license if you want to use the ACKS brand. And yeah, I've already got third-party content for ACKS First Edition. Would love to see more for ACKS 2e. And I think it's important to continue to be an open game. Like, obviously, I couldn't have done what I did if it wasn't for the open game license. And so it feels like it's kind of incumbent upon us to continue that tradition.
So it'll be 500 pages, and then the Orc license adds like another 100.
Right? Yeah.
I saw that thing. It was like, really, like that. It's huge.
Yeah.
I'm not good at legalese, so I have not even looked at it yet. But but that's cool. That I think it's important to. I love it because people always ask me all the time, like, can I make something for like Atomic Punk or like Macuahuitl, my Aztec thing that I'm doing? They're like, oh, can I make? Like, sure, go for it. Like, I love it when people make stuff with my stuff. Like, it's
it's a great feeling. Yeah, it's like the best. Yeah, no, totally. So.
Yeah, I wish I had that feeling. I wish people made stuff for my stuff, but not yet. Oh well.
It takes a while. I mean, it was It was years after I published ACKS before I had any third-party content. So yeah, it takes a while. So, and the sad thing is, there's this network effect. So like most of the third-party creators always go to wherever the biggest network is because they know they can sell more. So
that's kind of how OSC is, but
OSC has our network effect in our industry right now. Yeah, our sub niche.
Yeah. So as far as like old school games are concerned, outside of that, obviously it's 5e, but I'd love to see your game be something that people embrace as far as like building content for. So
I hope so. I mean, ACKS is so different from the other OSR games that I'm not even sure if it's an OSR game anymore. And I don't say that with disrespect to the OSR, but they've really over the years, they've really leaned into like rulings over rules, keep it rules light, low level play. And I'm more in the line of like, which I would consider as kind of like the Arnesonian tradition almost. And I'm more in the line of like the Gygaxian naturalism tradition, where you've like got tables for harlots and tables for venereal diseases that you get when you meet the harlots, and so it's just it's a more of a simulationist approach that no one else is really doing.
I agree. I lean more towards that too. Like, some people weren't happy when I changed like Atomic Punk to be 2d10. Then I made them reference like a weapon versus armor chart, and then I made them reference like a range chart and all that stuff. And I was like, no, this is the kind of game I like, though.
Yeah, exactly. And that used to be like a really well respected style of gameplay, and you had a lot of RPGs that were like that. And we're bringing it back. We're putting the band back together.
I hope.
Well, they also always say like, write what you like, write what you love, or whatever the phrase is. So why wouldn't you design a game that you would want to play yourself?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We got another super chat from Crafty here. Thank you, Crafty, for $2. He says, what sets ACKS apart from Birthright?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, okay, first off, I don't want to diss on Birthright. Birthright is a great campaign setting, and I consider it one of like the highlights of that era. That said, the approach between ACKS and Birthright is very different. So Birthright is much more abstract, and it is its economy is much less integrated and explained as part of adventuring than in ACKS. Let me give an example of what I mean, right? It's very hard in Birthright to understand exactly how many peasants you have, how much money those peasants are independently contributing, and what would happen if 7,000 of them were killed by a dragon. You can't really be done. It's all very abstract. In ACKS, you could literally say, okay, well, these 7,000 peasants lives in hexes 411, 412, 413, 414. They've been destroyed. We've lost the stronghold value. And so now my revenue has been reduced by this amount. So, and the reason for that is that ACKS is a bottom-up design and a top-down design that then links and integrates. And so I have the entire GDP of a fantasy economy built up on the top with a circular flow to make sure that all the right number of commodities are being built. There's the right number of laborers, the right demographics. So that's all up here. And then down here, I have at the individual level of the peasant family, how much do they make? What do they eat? What do they spend? And then they all fit together. So, so that took a lot of work, like a lot of work. But now it lets us give these tools to the GM where no matter what the players do, no matter how they break his setting, he can be like, okay, and this is what the implications of that would be. So I think that that's something nobody's ever done before. Maybe just they were not autistic enough to want to actually do that. I don't know, but yeah,
I think that's cool. I guess what I would say it sounds like is like Birthright, while great, is not a simulationist
right. That's
product.
Right. Yeah.
It abstracts a lot or just hand waves a lot, which I've done in my games. I know a lot of people have done the games. Like there's a point where like you don't have the support for it in the rules, and you're sort of like, what do I do? And I just have to make a ruling.
You just have to hand wave. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it sounds like you don't have. You're trying to fill those gaps so that you can.
I'm trying to fill those gaps. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And anytime I fill the gaps, what I try and do is I try and provide both a simple system and a more complex system. So for instance, like for supply, right? You can handle supply simply by saying you just have to pay your supply cost each month, or you can handle supply by actually tracking your supply routes and monitoring their length and building supply bases and et cetera. The game is not going to break if you just use the simple supply system. You get some more emergent maneuver warfare if you use the more advanced supply system, right? And we do that throughout the rules. So the domains at war combat system, the supply system, et cetera, et cetera.
Nice.
All right, let's see. I want to make sure people are asking really good questions. So
yeah.
Meme Man says, hey, Alex, I want to thank you a lot for the great system. I'm a freshman in college, and I'm the only one running anything but 5e. Any advice for adjusting my more new school-oriented players to Adventure Conqueror King system?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple ways you can do it. One is you tell them that, and this worked better before they ruined the show, but you tell them that, we're not going to be playing Lord of the Rings. We're going to be playing Game of Thrones. And so it's going to be much more bloody and deadly and hardcore, but we're going to have all these rules for becoming kings and shenanigans and things like that. I use that approach to recruit a bunch of folks. Another thing that I've done has been to, when I'm starting with 5e players, or 4e players for that matter, is to start the characters at third to fifth level and just dive in right there, so that they don't necessarily, the first to third levels were always understood to be the introductory levels when you learn the game. But if you've sort of set your baseline at like this fifth level kind of semi-heroic guy from the get-go, and then you play this weakling, you don't think to yourself, oh, this is an interesting character development of 0 to hero. You're like, oh, this game sucks and doesn't scratch my heroic itch. So so what I've done is started them at third to fifth level, and then they recruit henchmen at first level. And so they kind of see the first level guys going up as their henchmen. And so they get that sense of accomplishment from leveling up the henchmen, but they also started off a little more action oriented. So those methods have both worked for me.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's see. We got another super chat from Crafty. Thank you, sir, for $2. Is there an introductory adventure akin to Kingmaker? Do you have an introductory adventure in your books, I guess?
No, there's not an introductory adventure. There's an introductory adventure as a separate product, which is Sinister Stone of Saqqara, which takes you from first level to third level. There is not a sort of like a adventure path type Pathfinder book, which takes you first to 14th. No. Some people have mentioned that might be something to work on. I've never actively delved into it, largely because the vast majority of the GMs that run ACKS tend to do it in their own campaign settings, and they, therefore have less use for me saying like level 1 to 14 in my setting. On the other hand, some of them have said, yeah, but the reason we run our own campaign settings is because you didn't write that book. So
yeah,
can't win.
Can't win.
But a lot of the tools you're talking about, and that kind of ties into Sly Blue Demon's question here. It sounds like there's a lot of tools here, a lot of GM tools that will lean into like a low prep or zero prep game, and that's been a hot topic on the Twitterverse or the Xverse, whatever you want to call it now, with people arguing about whether or not it's good or bad to kind of just go in with minimal prep and rely on a lot of these tools or prep some of it. So this person, Sly Blue Demon's asking, sounds like a lot of GM tools you talked about generating the city as you go. How does that work?
Yeah, so there's a city generation system, and as you explore city blocks, you roll randomly to determine the size of the building and then the nature of the building. The nature of the building tells you the likely occupants. You then roll for the occupants, and then you roll for the splendor of the building, and voila, now you know what's there. To build that system, what I actually did is there was this massive archaeological project online where they went through the entire Roman city of Pompeii, and they mapped it all out, and they worked out how many fast food restaurants it had and how many brothels it had and how many houses it had and everything. And so I used that as my baseline data along with a couple other ancient cities. And so it doesn't just sort of generate a random city. It actually generates an actual ancient city with an economy that makes sense, with the right number of shops and the right, if you do it at large enough scale. Nice. Which, again, was a lot of work, but I think it was really worthwhile. So in addition to the dynamic city generation, we also have dynamic wilderness stalking. So when you're hex crawling through the wilderness, you don't just have random encounters with monsters. You have what are called terrain encounters, and those are basically points of interest that dynamically appear on the map as you're exploring. So you might find like a Stonehenge type structure that allows you to cast a certain spell at a particular time of day. Or you might find a safe haven where you can rest away from wandering encounters. Or, you might find a dead monster carcass with tracks leading elsewhere. And those are all sort of dynamically generated. And then for sea adventures, we also have a nautical encounters table, which has similar material, but rather than for cities or for forests or whatnot, it's for the ocean. And so you might find, magic coral reefs that can be used as spell components, or you might encounter a Leviathan, or a fog falls over your ship, and when the fog lifts, you've moved in a random direction, things like that. So for any of the main categories of gameplay, it really supports zero prep pretty well. The only place it doesn't support zero prep is dungeons, and that's mostly personal preference for me. Like, I really like handcrafting my dungeons. But I mean, presumably one could use one of the DMG appendixes if you really wanted to.
Yeah, Appendix A, it still works. That's cool, because I like those kinds of tools, because I've mentioned this a million times before. I know it bothers people that I run my games this way. I don't know why they care how I run my games, but whatever. I like to me, the fun of it is like rolling on these tables. Sometimes it slows it down as you're learning a new tool, but I like exploring the environment, the setting, the world with the players. So having the tools to do that is super valuable to me.
Yeah. What I tend to do is I use the random roll system, but I do the rolls in advance of the session. So like, let's say if I know the party is going to be exploring the forest, I'll just roll 20 hexes in a row of forest encounters. And so then wherever they go in the forest, like, it's just like check, 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 and I can go through it quickly. And so that gives me the speed of play of prepping, but it gives me like the spontaneous sort of like oracular power of the dice that you also get from randomness. So that's worked really well for me. It does require a little more prep beforehand, but I have the time, so it's all right.
Yeah.
Let's see. We got some more super chats here. Finally, worried this will be seen as a Traveler 5. I don't think so. I love Mark Miller, but T5, I don't think that was play tested.
I mean, it might be. You're right. That's absolutely a real risk. I guess what I looked at was two things. Is one, I had just produced Ascendant, which was a 500-page superhero game with logarithmic math and a simulation of superhero physics. And everybody told me that was a really stupid idea and nobody would play that. And everybody wanted rules light, narrative games for superheroes. And that game, we raised great money on the Kickstarter. We raised great money on the comic book, great money on the second Kickstarter. It sold out of its entire first print run. It was a #1 on Drive-Thru RPG. So it's like, okay, clearly there is an underserved market for crunch.
Yeah.
And then the second aspect is that I thought to myself, I don't want to swim in the muddy waters where everybody else is swimming, right? Like old school essentials, Labyrinth Lord, Lamentations of the Flame Princess, all of the new SR games, Knave, they're all competing for the same player base. And I would rather go over here and say, you know what? Those are great games. And if that's the experience you want, play those. This is a different experience. It's a different type of game. And if and there will be people who be like, I would never play ACKS. It's too complex. I much prefer OSE. And honestly, that's okay, right? Like different strokes, different folks. You have to know your audience and sort of the sort of person that I'm appealing to is the sort of person who loves both war games and role-playing games, who loves world building, who enjoys, the idea that they can really interact with the world and have it supported by rules. The people that want to invest time into the game. If it turns out to be a huge flop, I mean, I'll probably just go bankrupt and have to retire from the industry. So what can you do?
I mean, it still sounds very modular, though. Like it sounds like you can just play like a purely low to medium level like heroic game where you're just like hex crawling and adventuring and fighting orcs or whatever, and you don't have to engage with the warfare and everything at all. But if you want to do it, it's there. So
that's right.
Yeah.
And the rules are written that so like. It's like character creation, et cetera. Then it goes into dungeon delving. Then it goes into wilderness exploration. Then it goes into combat. Then it goes into sea journeys. Then it goes into campaign activities. Then it goes into mass combat. So like, you don't even need to read the last third of the book, last half of the book until later, later in your life, your campaign.
Yeah, I could see that being like, well, right now we're just doing they're level 1. We're going to do dungeons and wilderness exploration. So like I only need to read the stuff that I need to read, and then once we start getting close to the point where they want to raise armies and do that stuff, like, well, now I need to maybe look and dive into that.
Exactly.
So, and that's aligned with in 0E at the very beginning, Gary says, build the campaign slowly. Don't just go all in with this massive epic thing. Start it small and then build things onto the campaign as the campaign grows at the pace that you are ready for it to grow at. And so, if it's modular like that, that's great. It'll work just fine. And, I think because it is BX under the hood, like, the armor class system is different, but if you're not, if you can do basic math, it's easy to convert it. So if you're playing OSC, if you're playing Labyrinth Lord, you're playing, Rule Cyclopedia or still playing BX or BECME or something like that, I guess obviously this will still plug and play relatively smoothly into what you're doing there. So
it plugs and plays. I mean, I use all sorts of source material essentially in real time. Like the adaptation is trivial. The main thing that you just have to remember is that the ACKS characters are a little more powerful than the BX/OSE characters. So
And Ohm says, will you be releasing the official campaign setting? I want to play in the Empire. Do it. #Brosar.
Yeah. So the Arn Empire primer is now included in the core rules. So you get the Arn Empire primer in an appendix in the back. And then I do have plans to do the official Arn Empire campaign setting as a whole, which I think would be really good fun, and could do the whole Skysos conflict. What I haven't decided is whether I would do the Arn Empire campaign setting as like a box set or book, or if I might do it the way I did Buy This ACKS, where it's like, this is the dwarf book, this is the elf book, this is the empire book, this is the Oplenia book, kind of like the way Warhammer 40K does it. So then rather than be like, oh, I need to read this whole setting book, but actually I just want to play in this one kingdom down in the south, you can just buy the kingdom book. So haven't decided yet, but I am going to do that, assuming knock on wood that we don't get Traveler 5E'd, flop, and go bankrupt. So that would suck. Am I frozen again? I look like I'm frozen.
Yeah, it's okay. We can still hear you though.
I'm frozen and I look very sleepy now. I'm like,
it beats the creepy smile though. So
I guess it does. Yeah.
But thank you for the $4.99, man. I appreciate it. Let's see. Any other? Because people are asking good questions. They're asking the questions that I want to ask. So
we get to be lazy now and just put up theirs.
Yeah. So you guys are doing a good job. Black Lodge Games has a fun question. I think you'll get a kick out of it. ACKS Economics are the rules for business cycles and currency debasement at high level domain play. As he's a fellow fan of the Austrian School of Economics like me. So
Yep.
Okay.
So this is such a great question, and it's just fantastic. Okay. So the answer is no, but not because I don't personally subscribe to Austrian economic theory. I actually am also a supporter of Austrian economics. But rather, in order to make the game playable, I had to essentially make a toy economy. And so what I did is I have a fixed interest rate, which is then risk adjusted. And then rather than the utility theory of value, the game is basically driven by the labor theory of value. And the primary economist I consulted for that was Richard Cantillon, who was essentially the predecessor of both the classical school of economics as well as the physiocratic school of economics. So because that was how I built it, that had a lot of really valuable benefits in that I could reliably say, if you have a business with this much capital, it tends to yield this much if it takes this much risk over time, and et cetera. I could say, this realm of this size tends to produce this much money, blah, blah, blah. And we just don't worry about inflation and the currency cycles. Now, there are some rules for what are called vagaries, and there's vagaries of investment, vagaries of rulership, vagaries of war. And what those can do is they can change the demand modifiers for goods, and they can change the rate of profits of your businesses. So, for instance, you might, as a venturer, you might have set up a couple different businesses, and then there's a vagary of war where now, metal is much more valuable than it used to be, iron and bronze, because they're needing it for the army. And so maybe that messes up your trade route because you were relying on the arbitrage of cheap iron and now it's not cheap anymore. So it has, I guess you would say it has like microeconomic player focus cycles and debasement, but it doesn't have that at the economy as a whole. So great question.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to the game. It kind of like me imagining myself having to write all that gives me like anxiety. So like I'm literally autistic, but not that autistic.
Yeah, I have no comment on that. I don't even know what to say.
I've kind of thought about the same thing, because like I'm a reader, an econ nerd as far as like Austrian economics. So I read Human Action, I read Rothbard and Hoppe and all that stuff, and so I'm into that. But then I thought about it, and again, it was like the same problem. It's like, yeah, if the economy is like, if the basement's going on, like this just is more to track, and it's right. not going to be fun to play. So.
Right, because what the real world economists have to do is they have to adjust everything for inflation to be able to make comparables from year over year and historical periods and things like that. And so, like, why inflict that on the GM? Because presumably the king has an economic advisor who can tell him, like, yes, sir, I've adjusted this for inflation. We've already adjusted the time. Like, just leave it out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think even the ACKS player base would take me out and shoot me if I did that to them. Even they have limits.
Let's see. So we answered that one. Rex Steel 1 says, your game still sounds very, this was a while back, but your game still sounds very OSR to me, honestly. I don't understand why people think simulationism is anti-OSR. I don't know either. I think it's this, because when you read AD&D, it's not quite on the level of what it sounds like you're doing, but you can tell Gary was trying to do something similar. He was trying to heavily simulate this world. That's why there's tables upon tables upon tables for everything.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you can tell that the tables are crafted to produce a specific feeling. So I don't know. I think it's just a rose-colored looking back at it. We joke about it on the Gilded server that a lot of guys learned to play this game when they were 12 and they've never changed it. Never changed it since they were 12. They learned it when they were 12 and damn it, that's the way it's played, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. A lot of modern OSR games kind of like are based on like either dungeon crawling or maybe like some dungeon crawling and hex crawling, but especially lately there's like a lot of games coming out that are like almost purely dungeon crawl focused. And there's like this big idea of like, you know, GM fiat, so like, hey, just keep the rules vague and just like let the GM like, you know, make up their own stuff. So, and I've been guilty of that too, because, you know, sometimes you're just lazy, but but yeah. So
look, and there's nothing wrong with that that style of play. I think it's you know, it's one of the branching trees of evolution of D&D, and it's a really valid way to play. I just think it's not the only way to play. It's not the way I play. So yeah. My sense, if I had to guess why people think simulationism is anti-OSR, is I think that probably a large contingent of the OSR joined the OSR because they thought that 3.5 or 4th edition was too complex and too prep heavy. And so they wanted, so for them, the rules light aspect of OSR was actually more important than the get back to the 1970s, 1980s feel.
Well, that's probably also why BX is kind of like the you know, the lingua franca of like the OSR rather than like 1E or whatever. So
exactly because, you know, you had 1E and they had like Dungeoneer Survival Guide, Wilderness Survival Guide, like those were simulations. You know, and then there was all, you know, the Rune Quest and Rollmaster, and there was all this era of gaming that had a lot of simulation aspects.
I love Classic Traveler, and you know, that's like
Classic Traveler is amazing.
And it's literally making you do math formula for like how your ship flies through space, you know, as you're trying to, you got to slow down and use vectors and all. It's like, I love it. And it's definitely become very much a niche thing. I showed that page from Traveler where it has like the formula for like interplanetary travel, where you need to calculate, you know, acceleration and deceleration. And someone just looked at me like, what's wrong with you? Like, what? But and Crafty, I guess this is on this topic. Crafty wants to clarify. So to be clear, I'm really looking forward to ACKS 2, but I thought it was an important question to ask. I love crunchy games. So
no, I think it was absolutely an important question to ask. I mean, you're not asking anything I haven't asked myself when I've looked into the mirror after overdosing on caffeine. Like, you know, is this all going to work out? Have I gone too far? You know, are the Copen climate codes in the weather rules correct? Like, you know, so I mean, we'll see.
No, I think you're definitely tapping into a niche there that actually exists. So, I mean, and you already had like, you know, X1, which, you know, it's not like that was like rules light. You already had your superhero game Ascendant, so, you know, like you already know there's at least like an audience out there. So
one of my Discord guys said, he's like, you know, Dungeons and Dragons teaches young people to read, but ACKS teaches young people to excel.
That's like, funny.
Okay. That's pretty good. That's a good one. Yeah.
Shane says, if you play a science fiction game, you should learn some science. There's a reason Traveler players got A's in school.
Amen, brother. Amen to that. I used to tell my parents, you know, because they were always surprised at like all the weird things I had learned. They're like, "Wow, you learned that in school?" I'm like, "No, I learned that from Dungeons and Dragons." Like, I think the vast majority of the learning in my life has been because I've been motivated to do it for some stupid campaign along the way. Like, you know, my wife will be coming in and I'll be like, "Oh, I just bought these books on mushroom farming." She's like, "Are we starting a mushroom garden?" No, it's for the dwarves. She's just like, oh, you know, I buy a book on house cleaning, and I'm reading that, and she's like, "Oh, I really love that you're taking a stronger stance on domestic chores." I'm like, "No, this is about ancient housekeeping and how the peasants had to do it."
I'm gamifying this, so
See, I do that too, but I write supplements that like on modern weapons and explosives and stuff. So I'll Google stuff, and I'm like, "Am I on a list right now?" Like
You're on a
like,
list for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
For sure. Also, with a name like Viktor Gorchev,
Oh yeah.
you sound
Yeah.
like you probably work for KGB or
Yeah.
GRU. Or, I mean,
Yeah.
like there's no
Yeah.
doubt in my mind. They have a
Yeah.
list. They've got you identified. There's
I'm just
probably a
Googling how does
drone
C4
over
work.
your house now. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So let's go to this question here from Patty's Parlor. Yeah, he's a good guy. He says, how do you feel the totality of the contents of a game? Do you feel that everything in Acts 1 grew beyond your scope? Was there anything you feel you could have been cut? Can't read.
Yeah. So that's a great question. There's a bunch of stuff I'm leaving out of Acts 2 that I think are great mechanics, but at a certain point, you have to say, I guess this is enough. So for instance, like there's advanced rules if you wanted to separate land and lordship. And then, there's advanced rules if you want to set up an oligarchy. There's advanced rules for elite troops to differentiate the different types of mercenaries, and all the stuff that I've done over the last 10 years publishing Axioms magazine every quarter. And, there's like, I have even written up like, how to do astrology in the game world. And so you can work out your character's horoscope and get special benefits when the stars are right. And like, that's not going into the core rules. Like it's there if you want it. It's in Axioms, maybe it'll, but yeah. So, was there anything I feel could have been cut? We are cutting a few things in Acts 2 that were in Acts 1, largely things that were such D&D-isms that it's really hard to justify keeping them in now that we've moved off the OGL. So,
it sounds like you changed spells and you...
Yeah, you just had to cut some things, because, like I try and be, as much as I think Wizards of the Coast are a bunch of perfidious traders who deserve the worst, I do try and like respect intellectual property and follow the law, and so I want my game on its own. So so I had to cut some stuff.
Yeah, I feel that. And Black Lodge Games has a good question about this. How is experience acquired, and how does leveling affect character power level?
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so there's two ways to acquire experience: campaign activities and adventuring activities. Adventuring activities is exactly like you'd imagine. You go out, you kill monsters, you get treasure, you get experience points for the treasure and the monster kills. Okay, very standard. It's the fastest way to level, especially at low levels. That's going to be the dominant gameplay early on. Campaign XP, you get when you accumulate tax income from your realm, when you do research on magic items, when you accumulate divine power from congregants, or when your criminal syndicate yields successful smuggling, spying, stealing, etc. hijinks, or when your merchant guild house and caravans yield profit. And so all of those get translated into an XP value. What makes the campaign XP special, like the secret sauce that makes it work, is that as you level up, you have a threshold, and you have to meet that threshold. And before you meet that threshold, you don't get any campaign XP. So at first level, your threshold is like 25 gold pieces. So if you run a little profitable business deal, you get 50 gold pieces for it. Boom, you got 25 campaign XP for it. But by the time you're like 9th level, your GP threshold is measured in the thousands of gold pieces. And so now, if you want to be making money from campaign XP, you better have gotten a large territory or established a caravan of 100 wagons or whatever. And so what tends to happen is at any given point, you level, kind of like Peter Principle, you level to the point where you're no longer leveling anymore because the assets under your control are no longer sufficient to overcome your GP threshold. And that in turn is what motivates you. So I'm a duke. I'd like to become a prince. I'm trapped at 9th level as a duke. I want to become 10th level. I'm going to go try and conquer my neighbor and take over his principality. As a wizard, I'm stuck at 9th level with my current state of research. So I'm going to go on an adventure, help my assistants level up so they can better contribute to my magic research projects, and we're gonna push it higher, et cetera, et cetera. So that's very much the secret sauce, and that's what makes the economy work. and why we had to have the fixed interest rates as well. Because since we know how much money everything produces in the world, that tells us how much income those people have and what level they are. Because all we have to do is take their income and then check it against the GP threshold, and you can see that anybody who's running a duchy is going to be about this level of experience. Anybody who's running a Tower of Knowledge or an alchemy guild is going to have this much experience.
Nice.
I like that, because it's still gold for XP, but you're using the gold in a different way to motivate players to still get out
That's
there,
right.
Interact with the world, and advance
right.
advance the setting, advance the game.
Yeah.
In some respect. Grognard Nightmares asks, is this a silver piece system or a gold piece system?
So the monetary system is based on that of ancient Rome, and has been sort of carefully evaluated in that regard. So from the point of view of the players, it's a gold piece system because they tend to be moving in powerful circles pretty quickly. From the point of view of the peasants, it's a silver piece system. The typical wage for an unskilled laborer is about a silver piece a day. The wage for a skilled laborer is about 2 silver pieces a day. So so to your typical, hey, I'm a gong farmer in the city of Siveron. I make 3 gold pieces a month, right? Like I make 1 silver piece a day. So 60 gold pieces for plate armor is, a lot of money to me. But if you're an adventurer, you're like, hey, we just found this gem worth 5,000 gold pieces, and you just like toss the gong farmer 10 gold pieces as a tip for cleaning up the bathroom, and he's like,
amazing.
Yeah, can I be your henchman?
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting though is that because I used ancient Rome and I built out this full model, is we end up seeing exactly how large the economy is. And it turns out it's like tremendously gigantic, measured in, I have the GDP measures are all in the judge's book, and how much coin is actually circulating. And what's interesting is it really shows that this myth that like, oh, one dragon horde would totally destroy the economy is simply not true. Like if you look at what Alexander the Great captured in Persia, it dwarfs any adventurer's loot that's ever existed in the world.
Yeah.
It's measured in the billions and billions. And so like the idea that, oh, you got 50,000 gold pieces in a dragon horde, so now the economy is wrecked. No, like maybe the local farm is a little messed up with some inflation, but like it's not affecting Ara at all. Ara is our Rome. It's not affecting them at all.
Doom Bunny says, that's a great point. Adventure Smiths seem like the craziest rock star idiots to most people.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And the game really leans into that, right? Because it offers you like, this is how you can level up slow and steady by doing campaign activities. And it actually tells you the average ages that people are going to be. So like, if you get to 14th level priest by just doing congregants and divine research, you're like 70 years old at that point. And there's aging penalties that ablate your attributes. And so you have these crazy rock star sociopathic adventurers who level up much faster. And that's what enables them to conquer and take over and change the world, is because they still have the stats of young men. They have the magic items. They have the verve and the energy, and sort of they're up against one of a decadent older opposition. And then we also lean into that with like the tampering with mortality rolls, where they get increasingly freaky over time because, they've got weird curses and things following them. And we also have heroic burial rules, where if your character gets killed, but he died gloriously, they can sacrifice as much money as they want at your funeral, and then your new character starts with that much XP.
Huh.
Nice.
That's cool.
Yeah. But that only works if you died gloriously. If you died like a bitch, then nothing.
Nothing.
And so that actually creates interesting scenarios. Like, let's say the party has to retreat. If everybody runs away and they all get killed, nobody gets heroic burials. So Bob the fighter is like, I will stay and die and see you in Valhalla. And then he dies gloriously. And then when the group gets back, they give Bob a heroic funeral, and then he can come back as a leveled character. So you actually have we almost kind of simulate like that Valhalla style afterlife.
That's really cool. Yeah. Like a ton of flavor just from the rules.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like you're saying, you're going to have the rules evoke setting.
Yeah.
Planet Tobor TV with $15. Always generous. Thank you, sir. Awesome to see Macris back on. I like him. You other guys can go to hell, though. Just kidding. Thank you for a good internet show. You're welcome. Always happy to have Alex on.
I am in hell. It's called the Netherlands. I mean, Nether, Nether sounds pretty evil usually in fantasy settings. So yeah.
It does. Yeah, the Netherlands sounds like it should be like a really grim place ruled by
it's like the underdog or something.
Right, but actually it's like really pretty and the girls are kind of sexy and
yeah.
Shane Winter asks, is there a technological progression realizing your time scale is different? I do like how Pendragon handled it, with some weapons and armor types being available later generation.
So there is not in the core rules. I did write an Axioms article that showed you how you could differentiate between Bronze Age, Iron Age, and Renaissance technology if you wanted to, but that's not in the core rules. Largely because your typical game lasts about, if you go 1st to 14th level, it lasts about 5 to 10 game years, which isn't in most cases in the ancient world fast enough for any real technological progress. But we do allow players to like do magical experimentation and kind of like break the laws of magic, and so there can be magical progression through player-driven research, which is fun. And then in the dwarf book, we have rules for like dwarven automatons, and several of the players keep trying to make an industrial revolution happen. So
I like it. Let's see here.
Guys, I got to delay the game. I need to write rules for currency debasement and technology progression. So we're pushing back launch.
Black Lodge had a good question here.
If you are invaded, conquered, do you lose levels? If your meta level resources are pillaged, does the GP threshold adjust down or remain constant?
Yeah, if you lose your stronghold, you lose experience points. Absolutely.
Nice.
You get reduced in power. Apart from that, so if you're saying if your meta level resources are pillaged, so strongholds are unique in that regard. If your army gets wiped out or your sailing ships get sunk or something, your GP threshold does not adjust downward. And so then what you have to do is go back to adventuring to reaccumulate capital to get yourself back into the campaign game. So there's this constant intermesh of how much risk and time am I spending on adventuring versus how am I doing with campaign activities. And so, most people are still adventuring at least part of the time all the way through the game. It's just, their goals are different. Their reasons for doing so are different.
We got a lot of people asking about how often do you think about the Roman Empire?
Like every hour.
Yeah. I think about it a lot.
Yeah.
And Black Lodge says that's awesome. So,
and then, the town I live in actually goes back to Roman times. It's still named after the original Roman name, but the modern Dutch version. So
really, that's awesome. Yeah.
Doom Bunny says, have we spoken about Cleave yet? You mentioned it a little bit. I remember you made a video, and I guess this goes back to ACKS characters being a little more powerful than traditional BX ones. You made a video that I thought was really interesting, how like 0E fighter, his ability to attack multiple attacks against one hit die creatures, kind of the place that was in and how powerful that could actually be in its place. But you had said something, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that the fighter in ACKS can actually become more powerful than that, because it's actually in 0E, especially if you're referencing chainmail, that can be quite powerful ability. And so like, I know Cleave is one of those abilities, but I thought that was an interesting insight into like, because you mentioned how the fighter sort of just got nerfed. Like
he did. He got nerfed, and the mages got buffed with every iteration. And so by the time you got to 3.5 and you had total wizard supremacy. So I went all the way back and I sort of traced the history of how that happened and why it happened. And then I experimented with a bunch of different systems to make it work. And eventually the one I settled on was that as a fighter advances in level, he gets a damage bonus to match his to hit bonus. So, he's dealing more damage with every strike. And then every time he kills, he gets to attack again up to the limit of his level. And so when you're a high level fighter, you're killing foes with almost every blow because of your damage bonus. And then after you kill them, you get to attack again. And then in second edition, I've layered on an additional mechanic called sweep attack. And with sweep attack, you can attack, like, let's say 3-4 people simultaneously, and you divide the damage that you would deal between them. And if you kill at least half of them, you can sweep attack again. And so like if you're a 14th level fighter and let's say you're doing 1d8 plus 10 damage, So you're doing a minimum of 11 points. You know for a fact you can kill 4 kobolds with that. And so now it's not just 4 kobolds you can kill per round. You could kill 64 kobolds per round. And that's how and that keeps the fighters still being really influential even on like an epic sized battlefield, because one fighter can take out, you know, a company of men in a round.
Yeah,
Like if he's like legendary enough.
Legendary, exactly. But you know, at that point, you're Achilles, you're Beowulf, you're Huron. You know, you're actually doing those sort of feats. Like, you know, like if you read the Iliad, I think it's book 30 of the Iliad, and Achilles gets really pissed off and he gets in his chariot, and it's just like page after page after page, and every paragraph he's ganking multiple dudes in a nonstop onslaught, and it's just like and Homer's like in on drive his chariot, and the wheels are spattered red with blood, and he, you know, and you're just like, whoa. So I really want to think of that.
Makes me think of Dynasty Warriors, that game series where you're like literally just wading into like, you're like one badass dude just wading into like armies and just like whirling your staff or whatever, and people go flying.
And that's what the high level characters are like. And so what tends to happen in the mass battles is the high level characters tend to end up meeting each other on the battlefield, and so you know, then you get like these cool heroic duels.
Yeah, and you could have even like whole battles like just hinge on those duels, maybe like instead of like thousands of people dying, it could be like, hey, let's have our champions fight.
And you can do that for sure. Yeah. So
you froze again. You look like you're sleeping now, but you're smile sleeping. So
I'm getting progressively more exhausted looking in each frozen image. So you know, the next frozen image, I'm going to be like passed out on the floor. And it'll be like police tape.
We're getting towards the end of the stream, so I want to make sure like you got to talk about everything you wanted to, like, you know, to get people interested in this, because I'm excited for the Kickstarter. I'm definitely backing this when you make it
awesome.
when you get it to go live. And I encourage everyone else to too, because it isn't just another clone. This is something wholly unique. Like I would agree with you that it's almost moved beyond OSR. I know we talked about like it, you know, it's still compatible with it, but it's definitely become, it sounds like its own thing. But is there anything else that you want to like hone in on that we missed, that you feel like the people, they need to hear this?
No, the only thing I will add is if you check Arbiter of Worlds, which is my YouTube channel, I've done a bunch of episodes where I actually kind of break down some of the mechanics in more detail, how the mass combat works, how thieves work, etc. So if you're interested in learning more about some of the topics we touched on, that's a great place to look. You can also check arbiterofworlds.substack.com, which is my blog and newsletter. And if you want to, you know, make sure you stay updated, you can subscribe there. And, you know, once a week I say hi and, you know, send you a video. So it's pretty low key.
Let me see if I can find those links, and I'll throw them in the chat here so that people can do that right now. Found your Substack. Let me throw that in the chat for everyone. And his YouTube channel he's tagged in the video below. You just click on his name and you should be able to go subscribe to his channel. I saw you're at 1.3K, which is great. So like, is your channel monetized yet? Are you getting those Google bucks?
No, I was just talking to Victor about that. I didn't realize I could be monetized already. He's like, yeah, man, 500. So,
yeah, it used to be 1,000, but they recently changed it to 500.
Yeah, so I guess I should get monetized.
Yeah, you have to request it, and it takes a couple of weeks, I think. But yeah,
right.
Go for it.
Yeah, time to get the Google bucks.
Get the whole like woo! I made $20 this month. That's great. But yeah, I'm super excited for this. I wanted to encourage everyone to go check out a Substack there in the chat and support the Kickstarter. I'm assuming we'll know when it goes live, and they can subscribe to your Substack, I guess, if they want to.
It's going to go live on October 24th is the day.
Awesome.
October 24th.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Put it in my calendar.
I have drawn a line in the sand, and absolutely going to be October 24th unless I pause it to do currency debasement rules. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. Don't let me do that.
Just gonna copy and paste like all of human action. Do it. It's like 900 pages.
Yeah.
As the great sage von Mises said.
It's great. But yeah, I want to thank you for coming on, Vic. Is there, we'll start wrapping it up here. It's been about 2 hours, or close to it. Is there anything that you want to talk about with anything you're doing that you want to filter people over to?
Well, check out my YouTube channel. I'm at 900 subscribers. Unlike you Americans, I still have to get to 1,000 because they haven't rolled out that change, that whole 500 thing to the Netherlands yet for some reason. So I still have to get to 1,000. I would like to get there. So maybe give me a subscription. Other than that, I am going to slowly prepare my own Kickstarter for my old school essentials modern stuff. It's going to be an updated modern necessities, 2 add-ons, a cyberpunk and a Weird West add-on. And then I'm also going to write a adventure module kind of based on Keep on the Borderlands, but I'm going to call it Bunker in the Badlands. And yeah, I'm going to Kickstarter that. Awesome. I've already, yeah, I'm really looking forward to writing that. Awesome. But I've already ordered some new art to use for the covers. So yeah, I'm going to slowly prepare that. I'm kind of trying to give myself a kick in the ass because I've been lazy these last couple of months, and I need to set myself like a deadline, So, but yeah, just keep an eye on that. I guess I have no idea when that Kickstarter will actually go live. We'll see. But yeah, other than that, just check out my products: Modern Necessities, Modern Adventures Guide to Guns and Gear if you prefer 5th edition. I have some other stuff floating around. You can find that on Drive to RPG and some other places. And
that's
yeah,
a really clever name. I just caught that. Old School Essentials, Modern Necessities.
Yeah,
I literally caught that.
Yeah, it's basically just a pun.
Yeah, it's really clever. Yeah, sorry, I'm a little slow on the uptake there, but I'm like,
yeah.
End of the show. 3 hours later, I'm like,
yeah, yeah. I was really trying to come up with a name, and it was really hard. And then that just suddenly hit me, and I was like, yeah,
really
that's really fun.
It's really good. Yeah,
yeah,
top notch.
I was worried for a moment that Necrotic Gnome would get mad at me, but they were okay with it. So yeah.
Okay, so you got to do currency debasement, but then you got a new on IRS code, another 500 pages. Yeah. So there you go.
This man who is doing this, that's my brother. It's my older brother who taught me to play Dungeons and Dragons when I was a little kid, and he's like showing up to haunt me.
That's cool. He's been in our chat before, so I didn't know he was your brother.
That's my older brother. Yeah, he does he does the audio and video editing for Arbiter of Worlds.
Cool. I love his pickle avatar. So
yeah.
But yeah, 500-page tax code supplement.
It's gonna be big. Yeah.
And then you got to like filter in the tax loop so like players can start like
tax loopholes.
and then they can file their character's taxes and they give it to the GM and he has to like look it over and
right. You might get audited by like the gnomes or something,
I love it.
Yeah.
And Brian Jane says I'm logging into Kickstarter at midnight that day. So there you go.
Oh yeah.
I think we got people excited about it. So I'm excited about it. So
awesome. I am too.
But thank you for coming on. It means a lot. And again, as always,
you're having me on.
You're more than welcome to come back. More than welcome to come back whenever you want. Just let us know. Yeah. it's always fun talking.
I'll see you in a couple of weeks because I'm helping interview you again on the 14th. So
wow,
on a different channel.
Then I will see you in like
I'm on all these
days.
streams, so yeah.
Yeah, is there any other interviews you're doing in the future that we should point people to if they want to? Because they'll probably touch on other subjects that maybe we didn't touch here. Is there anyone else you want to talk about or schedule wise?
Let's see. So I do have some others scheduled, but strangely, I have foolishly neglected to put them on my calendar to know exactly when they are taking place so that I can talk about them. But yes, I'll put them on Twitter when I.
All right, follow them on Twitter. I'm sure, like you found this stream, everyone, you'll find those. So
yeah, 14th is the Weekend Geek. I know that one. I don't know the other ones.
Awesome. Well, I think we'll call it here, everyone. Keep an eye out for Adventure Conqueror King Imperial Imprint coming. Did you say October 24th? Did I remember correctly?
October 24th. That's right.
24th. I remembered correctly. Sign up on the. Is that when the pre-launch will go live, or is that when the Kickstarter?
No, that's Kickstarter's going to go live. Yeah.
So probably before that, keep an eye out because you'll probably have a pre-launch page before that point too.
Pre-launch page before that, yeah.
So check that out and subscribe to his Substack. Again, I'll put the link in the video description after we close this out, but it's in here in chat as well. And subscribe to this YouTube channel. And I love your YouTube channel. I don't comment on it much, but it's just a well of wisdom for like a young upstart like me to hear that, to hear all this design wisdom on your channel. It's great. So
awesome. I'm glad you like it.
Everyone should go subscribe to your channel. But we'll call it there tonight. I want to thank Alex. I want to thank Vic and chat as well. Thank you for the super chats. Very generous of all of you. Helps us pay for StreamYard and everything like that. So it means a lot to us. And until next time, we'll catch you guys next Monday.
Yeah. Bye.